Hello and welcome to another tutorial from David Ward, and in this tutorial we're going to go over how to get some transparent ground shadows. I'll say transparent ground shadows, basically a transparent background that has shadows on the ground and also are somewhat transparent. The reason you would need something like that is so you can composite different scenes together and say take a render and composite it over a photograph to where it looks like it's in the scene, throwing a shadow on the surface or the ground or tabletop or whatever it is you want to put your model on. So anyways, what brought this up was I made a little Harlem Shake video to go with the silly trend going around. I saw those silly videos like, this looks funny, I want to try that, so I made a little thing. And basically I rendered each character separately with this technique I'm going to show you, and then composite them together to where they look like they were all in the same scene seamlessly. So anyways, there's a couple of different ways, or more than that I'm sure, but I'll show you a couple of different ways to get the ground shadows. The first one being is just here in Blender Internals Renderer. It's one that you've probably seen many times before. Just go ahead and put a ground plane in there, scale it up, and then we'll go ahead and throw in good old Suzanne. And just get her set up here to where she's smooth with a quick little subdivision surface modifier there. And just take a peek through the camera and just go ahead and hit F12 just to get a nice render out. So you can see we have our monkey head throwing a shadow on this ground plane here. Now it's a little harsh, so I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and turn on some ambient occlusion, but not 1.0. Let's make it about 0.2. And then we'll do a test render there, and that helps fill in some of the shadows. Or some of the, helps light up some of the dark shadows. So anyways, so now we have our shadow there on the ground plane. But what if I wanted to composite this on top of something else? Well, I'd have to go into Photoshop or GIMP or something and go in there and delete out this box in the background and everything, and it'd just be a big hubbub and take forever. So there's an easier way to do that. So let's go ahead and escape out. Let's grab that ground plane. And what we want to do is go to our materials section. And we're going to create a new material. Let's call this one Shadows Only. Okay. And we'll scroll down all the way to the shadow settings and turn on Shadows Only. So now it's not going to render anything on that ground plane except for something that's throwing shadows. So right now it's only going to be the monkey head and the shadows that it's throwing. You can just barely see them. And the reason that is because we have that ambient occlusion turned on. So if I turn that off, boom, now you can see the shadows quite nicely. But like I said, it's a very dark, harsh shadows on Suzanne there, so we want that ambient occlusion turned on. But I'd also like to be able to see the shadows like this. So going to have to do a marriage between the two. And the way we do that is escape out. Let's go ahead and select our ground plane again. Go back to our materials. And under the shading, if you turn ambient all the way down to 0, you'll then get that shadow back. So, okay, let's look through our render here again. Now, it's rendering the background as gray. So again, we'd run into the problem if you wanted to composite this on top of something. You'd have to go in there and delete the background. Now, to make the background transparent, you just go to your world settings, and down here, where's it at? Maybe it's under render. Hold on, let me find it. Okay, there it is. It's under your render settings, under shading. The alpha is set to the sky, which, if you go to your world settings, the sky is this gray color, so we don't want that. We want the alpha to be transparent. So now, when we render, you'll see it's composited on top of the grid background, which is the stand-in for a transparent type of background. So anyways, now let's say the shadow's a little too dark. Maybe you want to make it a little less dark. You want to make it lighter. So easy way to do that is just go and escape out of our render again and go back to your materials for your ground shadow. And the way to make that shadow lighter or darker is just to change the transparency of your ground plane. Right now it's set to have 1.0 alpha, which means 100%. Say if we make it 0.5, it's going to be half as visible. So now if we render, you can see that that shadow's half as dark as it was. And then if you want to go even lighter, 0.25, you see it's even lighter. So that's a way you can play with that and get that shadow to look the way you want. Now, let's go ahead and save this while I'm at it. Let's call this one Shadows. Actually, Ground Shadows. And save. And so that's the way to do it on Blender Internal. Now, there's another way you can do it in Blender Internal that also translates well into cycles. And the way I found this technique was like I said on the Blender Shake video, I was looking for a way to be able to do what I did, be able to composite them together, but still render using cycles. Now, if I would have done it all in Blender Internal, I could have used just the simple shadows only technique. So anyways, I wanted to do it in cycles, so I had to look up a way to do it, and I came across this post on Blender Artists, and I got the address here. I'll copy that into the description area. But it's basically the name of the thread was Shadow Catcher with Cycles, and there was a guy asking pretty much how to do that. And a user named, or that calls himself Elaine, I guess that's his name, he came up with a pretty good technique on how to separate the shadows and the ambient occlusion out of the scene on different render layers, and then just composite them back together with a transparent background. So I took that and kind of ran with it. So I was able to get, thanks to this, I was able to get the technique that I was looking for. So I'll go ahead and show you that technique now. One thing we need to do is make this the ground plane. See, right now you can see the background through it. Well, we need that ground plane to completely enshroud our visible area here. So what I want to do, let's go to our side view, tab into edit mode, and let's subdivide that a couple of times. To tell you, I just realized I don't have my screencast keys playing. There we go. Of course, hopefully I wasn't modeling or anything, so hopefully that's not a problem for anyone. But anyways, okay, back to edit mode. So we've subdivided that a few times. Let's select these last two here, go to our side view, and just rotate those and drag them up until they're kind of forming the stereotypical endless plane type of thing. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and set the smoothing to shading to smooth. Set the smoothing to shaded. And then go ahead and put a subdivision surface modifier, and let's move it back to where Suzanne's not going into the curve at all. So if we look through our camera now, we can see that it's filling up this side, but let's rotate it until it fills up that side too. And if you just move it in the viewport, you might accidentally move it up and down. So to avoid that, just hit Shift Z, and it only moves it along the X and Y axis at that point. So we'll just move it to about right there, and if we render, you can see that it's still working fine because, well, we're still in Blender Internal and it still has the shadows only texture on it. So what I'm going to do is, just for the purposes of keeping this texture in the scene, even though I'm going to delete it from this item, I'm going to hit this F, and that means to save this data block even if it has no users. So go ahead and save that, and then go ahead and minus that off of there. So if we were to go here, we still see that shadows only is still in the materials, even though it's not connected to anything at this point. So anyway, so now if we render, you'll see we have that ground plane back there. So what we need to do in order to separate that from our model and shadow and get a nice transparent background again is to start playing with the render layers. So you go over here to your render settings, scroll, let's see, here in internals there at the top. In cycles it's at the very bottom, but again in the internals here at the top. So the first one is just the default render layer, so I want to rename that one to monkey head. Okay, create another render layer, call this one shadows, and in the shadows layer I'm going to say only render the shadow, and we'll go ahead and render the ambient occlusion there too. So when it renders the monkey head, it's going to render as normal. And then when it renders the shadows layer, it's going to separate out the shadow and ambient occlusion passes. So one thing we need to do, though, in order to be able to separate those is separate the objects into separate layers. So right now they're all in this first layer right here. You can see that orange dot right there. But if I select the ground plane and hit M, it brings up my move to layer. So I'll go ahead and put that on that layer there. If you hold down Shift, you can select that layer, and they'll both be visible. So what I want to do on the monkey head layer, I only want to render the layer that has the monkey head on there, which is that first one. But then on the shadows, I'm going to render both of them. So we'll go ahead and just do a quick little test render there. You can kind of see it's rendering both ones, one with the transparency, one with not. Now, so we got that rendered out, and it's got all the data added in. So let's jump over into our compositing layout. And if we go ahead and turn on Use Nodes, you can see monkey head here, boom. If we zoom in, you can see that it rendered just the monkey head and nothing else. So let's Shift D to duplicate that render layer, but we're going to change it. Instead of monkey head, we're going to say shadows. And you can see it pops up the shadow and ambient occlusion passes that are now available. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the shadows and ambient occlusion from this render layer, and we're going to make those, just transparent so we can composite with them. So I want to mix them together, so I'm going to add a color mix, but I don't want them just mixed together. I want to multiply them together. So we go shadow and AO right there. And if we add a viewer node, you can kind of see what we're doing as we're doing it. Let's go ahead and just drag that over there. Set this to be the viewer node. You can see what we're actually messing with. This is kind of, it takes the shadows and kind of creates a mask from them. So it's going to be pretty much strictly black and white data. You'll see some harsh blacks and whites and a little bit of softness, but overall, the shadow is going to be pretty much a stark black and white type of thing there. So what I want to do now is I want to swap that mask, and I want to make everything that's white, I want to make it black, and everything that's black, I want to make it white. The reason being is because I'm going to add a converter, and it's going to set the alpha, and it's going to set everything that's black to transparent. So if I did that now, and we turn on our, okay, we got it turned on. Oh, not the image, to the alpha. There we go. You can see everything that's black is now transparent. So I don't want that. I want everything that's white transparent. So you would think that you could just turn this to white, which I guess it doesn't work that way, I guess. It just makes everything that's black white rather than making it transparent. So anyways, what we got to do is we're going to go to color invert and go ahead and pop that right there. And now you can see it took that mask and negated it, negatived it, inverted it. It made everything that was white into transparent rather than the other way around. So now we have our shadows separated out. So if we were to go ahead and add a, what would it be, under color, there we go, alpha over, drag that up here, and then drag that there to our viewer node. Right now it's the shadows on top of our monkey head, so it's making the monkey head not really that visible because the shadow's too dark. If we swap those right there, boom, you can see. So now we have our monkey head and our shadow with a transparent background. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Dave, that shadow's way too dark, and you're right. So let's get in and let's make that shadow a little bit brighter. So what I want to do now is we're going to add a color mix, and we're going to pop that in right there, and we're going to mix it with a white color so it makes more and more of it transparent. So right now we're mixing the image right there with just a white RGB swatch there, and it's set to be a factor of 1.0, so it's pretty much all white. So if I lower that down, you can see it gradually fading that shadow back into place until it's a factor of 0. It's 100%, and I fade it up, slowly gets lighter. So let's make it about let's say 0.65. Now say you want a softer shadow. It's pretty harsh. That's a pretty harsh shadow. So let's make it a little softer. The easy way to do that, just go to add filter blur. I'm just going to pop that in there, and the Gaussian filter is fine. Let's set it to say 6 and 6. So you can see it now has a soft shadow underneath with also a transparent background. Now, once you get that done, all you got to do is hit F3. Actually, make sure you're okay. Everything's good. I was gonna say make sure you're going to your composite node, not just the viewer node. So if we go F11, you can see that this is the render result, which is what we're going to be saving when we hit F3. And you just type whatever it is you want it to save as, and save as image, and it saves a transparent PNG. As long as make sure you also set the RGBA, that's red, green, blue, alpha. So make sure you do that, then you save it, and you've got an image with a transparent background. Okay, so that's how you do things in the Blender internal. Now it's very, very similar. The screen grab that I showed you that Elaine had came up with was actually in Cycles, but it's very, very similar. So we'll just go to Cycles Render, and let's go ahead and just do a quick render so we have the information. Oh, one other thing, you'll have to change some of the lamp settings from Blender internal to Blender Cycles. So let's go ahead and escape out there. Oops, there we go. As you can see, the monkey head is not quite as visible. So let's change this lamp. I found that a sun lamp makes the best light here. Other people might disagree and think I actually used an area lamp, but I had issues getting it to work well without ridiculously high numbers. So I'll just stick with a sun lamp. And a strength of 1 is a little too light, so I'm going to set it to a strength of 2. And another thing you can do in Cycles is if you go to your world settings, the background color, if you go ahead and use nodes, that changes the overall color or the brightness of the scene as well. So if we go to the rendered view, you can see right now, it looks pretty good. But if we wanted to make it a little darker, you just change the background color to black, and you can see it kind of darkened it up. But if you want to make it a lot brighter, it does just the opposite. So anyways, let's make it kind of a medium to dark gray color, if it'll want. Once you start having the rendered view in here, it kind of starts slowing things down. So we'll set it a little bit darker. Okay, so that's a pretty decent view, I think. Pretty decent shadow and lighting setup. Now, one thing to take note, a lot of times when I set things up in shadows, I don't actually use lamps. I use planes with a emission material set to them. And that works fine usually, but for this particular method of separating the shadow out, it has to be a lamp that actually throws a lamp shadow. That's pretty much the only way this technique will work. It has to be a lamp. So anyways, once you get that done, let me go ahead and change some of my render settings here so it acts a little faster. Go ahead and GPU, and let's change the performance. Where's that at? There it is. Set that to a little bit bigger. Let's try 132. Just double the size there. Okay, so now let's go ahead and render out a test view, just so we have some information to work with. Oh, one other thing real quick, just thought of this. Remember in the internal on the where was it? I missed it again. Where was it? Okay, hold on. Okay, remember in internal, I think it was under sampling. Well, let's just go take a look. Blender render. Okay, it was under performance. No, it was under shading. There it is. The transparent alpha for the background. So it's under a different tab in Cycles. It's under the film settings. Right now we have it set to transparent, which is good, but we also need to check that transparent box there. Okay, now when we render, you'll see that we get the monkey head by itself on one render, and then it'll go ahead and render the second pass. And one other thing here in Cycles, you don't have to render the monkey head also on the second, on the shadow layer. So let's go ahead and collapse some of these just to get them out of the way. And like I said, on Cycles, the layers panel is way down at the bottom. In Cycles, you do not have to have the monkey head layer turned on as well. So let's go ahead and turn that off. So in monkey head, we're only rendering the layer that has the monkey head. Shadows, we're only rendering the layer that has the ground plane. So now when we render, you can see that it separates them out even better than it did in Blender Internal. So it's only the shadows. Like I said, in the internal, it doesn't actually capture the shadow if you don't have the object on the scene, but in Cycles, it does. So once that finishes out, you can take a look, and pretty much the node setup is going to be almost identical. We'll take a look and see if there's any changes we need to make, but I think for the most part, it's going to be pretty much the same. So let's see. I think all these nodes are, yeah, just take the render layers. Take the shadow and ambient occlusion out of there, multiply them together, mix them with some white if you want to make it more pale, and then blur it a little bit, and invert set alpha, alpha over, so on and so forth, and there's your final product right there. So that's pretty much it. That's you just take, if you want to render, video out, it's pretty much the same thing. All you have to do is set your output to be RGBA, and then put whatever folder you want, and yeah, you have to render out a series of PNGs rather than trying to do MPEG or whatever. You have to render out the series of PNGs and then bring it back in to your video sequence editor if you want to composite it over something else. Okay, so again, that's pretty much it. Hopefully I didn't rush things or anything like that, so hopefully you got something out of this. And again, thanks to Elaine for kind of getting me started in the right direction. And that's going to be it for this tutorial. So thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.